Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our fourth installment on the 5G webinar series. Tonight we'll be discussing 5G health and safety. Before we start, a few webinar considerations. Attendees are reminded to ensure their volume is turned up on their device. Ensure you have a stable internet connection. This will ensure the streaming and audio will run smoothly. Attendees can ask questions via the questions panel located within the GoToWebinar control panel. By default, the control panel is located on the right-hand side of your screen. The chat function is reserved for webinar organizers and panelists to communicate with attendees. Attendees will not be able to chat with each other, however, are encouraged to ask questions. A recording of the presentation will be made available on the SAIEE YouTube channel, SAIEE TV. The recording will also be made available on the SAIEE website under the Events drop-down menu in the section Past Events and Webinars. This page is updated regularly, so ensure you check back as often as possible for new uploads and subscribe to our YouTube channel. A certificate of attendance will be issued a few weeks after this webinar once we have received the CPD validation number from EXA. I'd like to introduce you now tonight to our host, which is our Junior Vice President, Mr. Pascal Motswasele. He is a fellow of the SAIEE and, as I mentioned, the current Junior Vice President. He has been a member for 22 years and has taken leadership roles within various institute structures over the past 6 years. He is a council member for 6 consecutive years and an EXCO member for 4 consecutive years. He is presently the chair of the Control and Automation Chapter and the 2022 Conferencing Organizing Committee Chairman. Previously, he served as Chairman of Events and Marketing Committee and the Chairman of the Power and Energy Section and the Secretary of the Central Gauteng Center. He was and he is the Institute's Engineer of the Year in 2018. I hand you now over to Pascal.
Thank you, Minx. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's session, which is correctly so, episode 4 of a series of 7 webinars on 5G technology. Unfortunately, we seem to have a technical glitch. I was hoping that you can see my face, but our cameras just don't want to switch on for today. So, thank you, Minx. So I'll be your pilot for the session. These sessions, please know that they are hosted by the SAIEE in collaboration with the AUTC, the IEEE Africa Council, and SIGRE Southern Africa. Just a reminder for some of you who are registered professionally with EXA, the Engineering Council of South Africa, these sessions are indeed CPD credit bearing. So please stay till the end so that we may legitimately then issue you with attendance certificates and your CPD points. I like to think that you are here this evening to learn something. So please don't be shy to use the Q&A tab, which is on the right-hand side of your screen, to type your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are fortunate to have 2 excellent speakers with us tonight. Our first speaker and presenter is the Chief Technology Officer and the Director of Technology at Alpha Wave Mobile Network Services, Wessel van Brakel. Wessel van Brakel is a graduate of the University of Stellenbosch and was awarded the degrees B.Eng in Electrical and Electronic Engineering cum laude in 1996 and then M.Eng Electronic Engineering again in cum laude in 1998. Since 2011, Wessel is participating member of the South African Bureau of Standards Technical Committee 73, Work Group 5, Non-Ionizing Radiation, and the South African Mirror Committee of IEC TC 106, Methods for Assessment of Electric, Magnetic, and EM Fields Associated with Human Exposure. In 2020, he accepted the position of South African representative on the Committee MT3 of the IEC Technical Committee 106 for the technical revision and preparation of the International IEC 62232 standard. Wessel contributes back to industry through various international conference and workshop participation, like this session that we are having today, and other publications and presentations. Over to you, Wessel.
Thank you very much, Pascal and Minx. Just quickly show my screen, and good evening to all the members. My topic tonight will be on human exposure to electromagnetic fields. in specific the effect of 5G on compliance assessments and EMF measurements for EMF safety. So just the content for tonight, give you a quick review of our company. Then we'll look at the guidelines for safe exposure. We look at the typical exposure versus the guidelines at base stations. We look at the introduction of 5G and the EMF safety around these base stations due to that, specifically EMF compliance assessments and measurement protocols. And then we'll conclude on that. So our company was previously known as EMSS Consulting. Quite a strong history in electromagnetics with quite a few PhD and master's degrees in our company. We also form part of the South African technology group Alpha Wave, which has currently about 16 companies in its stable and about 200 employees full. When we look at electromagnetics, we've worked on human exposure to EMF since 1993. Research on the exposure to cell phones and base stations started in 1999 already. We've done thousands of site surveys and measurements all around the globe, not only in South Africa and Africa. And then we contribute back, like Pascal said, by presenting at international conferences, also publicized journals. And then we're also actively involved in IEC standards and as well in the bioelectromagnetic society. So guidelines for safe exposure. There are two guidelines formally recognized by the World Health Organization. One of them is the IEEE guideline C95.1, and the other one that I will expand a little bit on tonight is the ICNIP guidelines. Now, the ICNIP guidelines has looked at research studies since the 1950s. That is when the first man-made electromagnetic fields were introduced into our environments. Intense period of research was in the 1970s when microwave ovens became popular. And then, of course, in the 1990s with the invention of cell phone towers and cell phones. The detailed review of latest results or research was done in 2018. And from there, update guideline was published in 2020. Now, as I said, it's recognized by the World Health Organization, and it's also endorsed by our South African National Department. So the basic restrictions that ICNIP sets is shown here on the bottom right, these ones. 4 watts per kilogram whole body power density, your body will increase in temperature a small amount so that your body will start experiencing mild heat stress. So this is the basic restriction set by ICNIP. They then have 2 tiers of restrictions as well, one for the occupational worker and one for the general public. Occupational worker is 10 times less at 0.4 watts per kilogram, and the general public is another factor of 5 lower at 0.08 watts per kilogram. It doesn't only look at the thermal effect of electromagnetic exposure, it also looks at non-thermal effects, but the thermal effect is the only one that gives adverse health effects to the human body, and that's then the one that's being concentrated on, also being implemented to make sites compliant. One good thing about these guidelines is that they're reviewed by authoritative health bodies quite regularly. You can see a few in the lead up to the revision. So that is also a good thing that happens from these guidelines. Now, the acceptance of ICNIP worldwide. If you look at the network limits, you can see that about 124 countries around the world in 2015 has adhered to ICNIP. Then there's a few others, like for instance the United States, which have their own FCC guidelines, Canada with their safety factor or safety code 6, and in Australia with their PANZA guidelines, follows quite closely. We also have, for the handset limits, about 147 countries worldwide that adheres to ICNIP. So it is the de facto standard for non-ionizing radiation internationally. If you look at the typical exposure versus the guidelines, for compliance assessment, You apply these guidelines to a base station, see where the exposure is above these guidelines. And these can result in exclusion zones roughly around the antennas and closer to the antennas. For the compliance assessment, you usually assume maximum transmit limits may be exceeded in these zones, and even though it's mostly not easily accessible because it's close to the antennas, there are certain areas where these zones are accessible, and implement measures needs to prevent access to these areas. As an example, I'll show you a mast type of site. On the right hand side, you can see the photos of the mast, and then these exclusion zones are sitting close to the antennas, quite far away from the ground, so it's not easily accessible by the public or the general worker. You can see the two tiers in red and yellow, the general public guideline. And just for not giving sensitive detail away, I've blanked out all the labels of the different service operators' antennas. Then on a rooftop, now of course one can get closer to these antennas, so it's easier to access these exclusion zones. On the right, you can see another example of a rooftop installation, the top here. And this bottom left picture here, you can see the neighboring building also have antennas against the elevator shaft building. And if you look at the exclusion zones for this site, you can see that these exclusion zones now combine. And also, especially on the neighboring building, there are areas where you will easily access these exclusion zones. Also, just show you the accessibility of these exclusion zones with these pictures. You have your exclusion zones with a top view and overview shown here. And then I show you the imprints on the rooftop. This is the area when people reside in those areas, you will be overexposed to the international guideline. Now 5G is just an addition of energy on a site. If you look at 5G, it's the latest mobile network technology, offering more speed and lower latency. So it's a better experience for the end user that is given. But the same guideline still applies. The 5G is rolled out in certain frequency bands that's already covered by these guidelines. So the same principle in establishing compliance on a site also exists for 5G.
My apologies, Vessel.
Yes.
Sorry, your audio is dropping. So I don't know if it's a bad connectivity, but we lose you every now and then.
Okay, give me 2 seconds and I'll just move my network connection.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, Minx. Let's see if it gets better. So currently in South Africa, we're using the 3.5 gigahertz bandwidth for 5G. And there's 3 mobile network operators with a license in those bands. 5G can also operate at various other frequency bands, lower and higher, including the millimeter waves, which for example is at about 25 to 40 gigahertz. Now, what makes 5G different from the other technologies? And the difference is massive MIMO beamforming as well as steering. So the energy from the 5G antennas can be focused. Those focus points can be moved around to follow the end user. So this is the main difference between 5G and all the other technologies. But for EMF safety implications, you still assess the installation based on the same guidelines. Exclusion zone dimensions still depend on the technical parameters. That's the amount of power being transmitted, as well as the direction that these beams are looking in. But there are some technical changes, such as actual maximum transmit power used to cater for beam variations in time and space. In other words, the network operators can limit the amount of power over a certain time period so that the average of the power and the exposure does not go beyond a certain preset value in there. So the effect of 5G on EMF compliance assessments. If you look at this imprint on a building rooftop that I'm showing, there are quite a few demarcations and signage on this site already. The antennas shown here, the small antennas in blue, are the addition of the 5G antennas. And without that, this site is compliant. All the limitations and implementations are in place to make sure that nobody can go into areas to be overexposed. With the addition of this 5G antennas, with a limitation on the EIRP, which is set by ICASA, the regulator in South Africa, that was also published in the government gazette. So that limitation is set at 61 dBms for every 5 megahertz of bandwidth that you transmit in. Now, with the EIRP limitation of power, the addition of these 5G antennas actually don't increase the exposure and the accessible exposure on the rooftop significantly, and the measures in place is still valid to make the site compliant according to the ICNIRP guideline. If you look at this actual maximum approach, you can actually see that the exclusion zones and the imprints of the accessible areas now increased, and of course a reassessment of the site will need to be done. So when the power increases, you need to reassess the sites to make sure people do not get overexposed. There's no limitation of power, so no power limit. You can see that entire rooftop will be overexposed, and it's very difficult then to implement anything to make sure that people don't get overexposed. When you look at measurement protocols, I'll first show you the spectrum usage in South Africa. You can see here the different bands active for mobile network operators here. We have 6 mobile operators with licenses, and in each band you can see how many of those mobile operators do have licenses in the band. In the 900 megahertz band, there are 3 with license. In the 3500 megahertz band, where you have your 5G, you have 3 as well, and so on. Now, the technologies used for the frequency division duplexing is in the 900, 1800, and 2100 bands. There your technologies is GSM, UMTS, as well as LTE. They use dynamic spectrum sharing, which means in one frequency band, they can have different technologies in there. And then in the 2300 and 2600 bands, where they use only LTE technology, that is the time division duplexing. And then for your 5G, currently only in the 3.5 gigahertz band, they use the so-called 5G new radios. Now, there are a few test sites in South Africa where they also transmit 5G new radios in the highest 700 megahertz band and the lower 800 megahertz band. But because of our migration of analog TV to digital TV not being in place yet, they can't really expand their networks in those frequency bands. Otherwise, it will interfere with the television signals of analog. If you look at 5G measurements, the measurement protocol that I'm showing you here is individual spot measurements. So we do peak, max, hold values. The report is a typical exposure values, and the results are actually unextrapolated peak field instantaneous exposure results at the specific date and time of the measurement survey. So it's the values as we are measuring, I'm showing here. Standard equipment is used with standard configurations. These measurements are performed based on the IEC 62232 standard, measurement standard. And then all the setups are outside of the general public compliance boundary, so nobody is overexposed. And it's also in the far field of all the antennas. So of course the fields has already developed in those areas, and you can do proper measurements. Now, what I would like you to show here is the effect that 5G have on your measurement accuracy and your effect that you have on your measurement results. Now, this case one that I'm showing was at the freestanding or standalone site. That means that all the transfer of data happens only through the 3.5 gigahertz band for 5G. Now, to activate the beam, that the beam can point directly at you so that you can do a proper measurement, you have to have a high throughput of data. Now, to achieve that, a local iPerf server with UDP protocol was used. And during these measurements, we got more than 1,000 megabits per second download speed, which is quite good for cellular downloads. This table is showing the exposure values at that position of measurement. First of all, without any iPerf active, and then with the iPerf server active. And the observation one can make here is that if you only look at the operator under investigation, and we show in percentage of ICNIRP general public, in the 3.5 gigahertz band, it went from very small amount of exposure to quite a bit higher, although not close to the guideline limit. The theoretical calculation that we've done, we would have expected about 5.62%. It's in the same ballpark. We used bore site gain. There might be another user on the site. So we are very happy that we pulled a very nice beam there, and this was a very good experiment. At our second site, we were at a non-standalone site. So their data can get through any of the technologies in any of the bands that the service operator or network operator has on site. Now, the local iPerf server was not active on that day. We had to use an international iPerf server, also UDP protocol, and we achieved about 400 to 600 megabits per second, which is also still a very good. The results that we saw was actually not what we expected. In the 3.5 gigahertz band, you can see that there was no extra energy through that band. All the energy for those downloads came through the other technologies and other frequency bands. We actually expected about 11.5% if all the download came through the 3.5 5G band. And this was a situation that we at first did not understand. We did some research, and part of that research was also a discussion with the mobile operator. And they confirmed that the new radios use something called dual connectivity, where of course you get your throughput of data through all the different technologies at the same time for the same user. That is also part of the interband carrier aggregation. And what they also told us, and what wasn't quite known even in the IEC technical committees, was that these 5G new radios is quite autonomous in assigning spectrum usage. So interesting there is that the radio itself decides to only give you accessibility to the 5G network once all the 4G bandwidth is exceeded. So in our case, 2 above, the 4G bandwidth was about 35 megahertz. And because of our international iPerf server, it didn't really need more than that bandwidth because it couldn't give us a larger download throughput. So that is why we achieved these results. We also contributed back to the IEC 62232 standard on that, and that's now included in that standard, which is very soon will be given through to the national committees for final check through on that. So we call this indeterminate beamforming. This is when we as an independent assessor and most of the regulators worldwide lack network control for 5G beamforming. When operators and equipment vendors do these type of measurements, they actually force their equipment to only work through the 5G bandwidth. So that is a little bit of a trick that they have, and that trick actually causes that they don't see these type of scenarios that comes through. Now, the effect for us, of course, is how do we report on that? Because the results are only typical for attained download speed. And then also when it comes to compliance measurements, and you have to prove that a certain boundary of compliance exists, you need to do something called extrapolation, where you take the values that you measure and you extrapolate it to worst case scenarios. And at this moment, independent assessors and regulators can't do that without manipulating the network, the 5G network. So in conclusion, I think it's important to remember that humans have been exposed, even though to low levels of RF, but they have been exposed to since the 1950s. The ICNIRP guidelines is a comprehensive review, and the exposure below the guideline actually, from all the authoritative health bodies, proven that there's no adverse health effects if the exposure is below. The addition of 5G is just an addition of energy on site. The power limitation schemes can have an impact on the accessibility exclusion zones, and the compliance assessment is still the same using the same guidelines. And the challenges in measurements is this indeterminate beamforming that I showed you just now. And that means it's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vessel. Interesting material you've covered. Our apologies, ladies and gentlemen, for the dip in the voice during the presentation. Maybe it's because we are electrical engineers, and so technology decided to mess around with us today and embarrass us in our own forte. But okay, we soldier on. Vessel, thank you so much for that presentation. I can already sense a number of questions that will come your way during the Q&A session. But before we get there, let's first have our second presenter. Apologies again, gentlemen and ladies, because the camera doesn't want to switch on, so you won't be able to see our faces. But our second presenter is Dr. Esa Suleiman. Dr. Suleiman is an expert in molecular diagnostics of infectious diseases which affect humans and animals. His research focuses on developing novel molecular diagnostics technologies, including lab-on-chip point-of-care molecular diagnostics platform, combining cutting-edge microfluidics, isothermal amplification, and 4IR technologies to enable rapid diagnosis of diseases such as COVID-19, brucellosis, and bovine tuberculosis, and other pathogens at point of care. His research also focuses on developing tools for understanding the epidemiology and genetic diversity of pathogens such as SARS-CoV-2. Over to you, Dr. Esa.
Good evening. Thanks, Pascal. I hope everybody can see my screen, and apologies that you can't see me as well. So I'm just going to go into some of the work that we've done at CSR with regards to 5G technologies, health, COVID, and particularly COVID-19 and vaccines. So there's this widespread speculation that 5G technologies pose a range of health threats to humans, and I think this is something which is quite evident in the media and social media. Every second message you get is probably related to some sort of 5G conspiracy and health effect-related conspiracies. And these supposed health effects related to 5G, which and other EMF frequencies include cancer, skin effects, ocular effects, male infertility, as well as spreading of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and then also mutation of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, so emergence of different variants which are driving the second and third waves in many countries. So I'm just going to look at some of those aspects, and many of these claims are actually unfounded and based on pseudoscience, so science that cannot really be backed up by laboratory experiments and a lot of misinformation and fake news. So we'll talk a little bit about some of these health effects and basically what current research shows with regards to these various health effects. So like I mentioned, there's numerous health effects associated with 5G and particularly EMF, radio frequencies, and EMF. The first one, which is probably on everybody's mind, is cancer. And the International Agency of Research on Cancer, IARC, listed radiation from cell phones as being possibly carcinogenic to humans. But this is merely as a precaution. But under real world conditions, and I think Vessel's talk highlights this, that there's a major difference between real world conditions and laboratory conditions or animal-based studies or human population-based studies. And you'll see as I go through the talk that that is a strong message that we want to reiterate and to highlight, that real world conditions do not necessarily mimic the laboratory conditions, and some of the effects that I mentioned or seen under laboratory conditions, there's no supporting evidence under real world conditions to confirm this, and cancer is one of these supposed health effects that under real world conditions there hasn't really been any conclusive evidence to support this, but I think further research is required. So the second one is skin effects, and laboratory experiments show that high power density RF exposure could lead to an increase in skin temperature, which would be perceived as a sensation of heat. But this is again exposure beyond what would normally occur under real world conditions, and the body has a very complex thermal regulation system that should be able to deal with modest localized heat exposure. So again, there's no conclusive evidence that there are any adverse skin effects by 5G technologies, and we'll come back to the skin effects related to 5G in relation to COVID a little bit later down the presentation. The other condition listed is male fertility. So there's again fears that high levels of or exposure from radio frequency or EMF would affect sperm motility and negatively affect fertility. But this is under, again, laboratory conditions shows that this is a possibility, but under real world conditions, this has not been proven scientifically based on the levels of exposure from 5G communications equipment. So this point will come across consistently, that laboratory versus real world is different. And one of the ones that's been in the media for quite a while and also has been hyped a lot is this RF electromagnetic hypersensitivity. And in fact, there is one town or community in the US that has actually banned all electronic communications devices, so to cater for people supposedly suffering from electromagnetic hypersensitivity. And these symptoms associated with this is headaches, fatigue, stress, burning sensations, typically symptoms that are difficult to quantify and correlate with each other. So they very, very vague symptoms that can't really be described or medically proven. However, many studies have shown that these symptoms do not necessarily correlate with the RF exposure. So under controlled experimental conditions, it's impossible to replicate these electromagnetic hypersensitivity symptoms, so symptoms of headache, fatigue, stress, etc. upon RF exposure. So that discounts that particular effect. So many of the effect of the studies so far that have reported alleged health effects only observe possible negative effects when conditions support that. So that is basically when the EMF levels are consistently higher than those typically emitted under real world conditions. So the EMF levels have to be much higher, and these conditions or these effects are only noticed under very, very specific, very laboratory controlled conditions that do not necessarily mimic the real world. So 5G equipment under real world conditions should ensure that such effects don't occur. And with cancer, there's a little bit of conflicting and contrasting evidence. The several animal studies show that higher than normal EMF levels could have possible carcinogenic effects, but human population level studies, so there's a lot of research being done looking at meta-analysis and population-wide studies over the last few years, and these do not show a strong correlation between higher EMF levels or EMF levels under real-world conditions and cancer. So I think it's very, very important to understand and identify that some of this alleged health effects associated with EMF and radio frequencies are under very, very controlled laboratory conditions that do not necessarily mimic the real world, and therefore these results should be taken with a grain of salt. But nevertheless, with cancer, I think despite a lack of evidence under real world conditions, there is a strong effort, and it's important to conduct further research, specifically with regards to diseases like cancer. So long-term, longitudinal and population level studies will help to conclusively decide and provide evidence whether 5G or other EMF technologies can actually pose a significant health threat with regards to cancer. So moving on to 5G and the SARS-CoV-2, which is currently driving the global COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a few major conspiracy theories. So the first one being that the 5G radiation or EMF radiation from 5G towers would actually weaken the immune system, and thus would result in increased susceptibility to the virus. The 5G technology rollout actually contributed to the spread of SARS-CoV-2 in many countries, and the 5G technology actually causes mutation of the virus and actually results in production of the virus itself. And lastly, that 5G chips will be included in the vaccines in order for governments to spy on and track citizens. So we'll just go briefly through these various conspiracy theories to and show how they are actually not really true. So the first one related to 5G effects on the immune system is that the 5G would weaken the immune system, and this would result in increased susceptibility and therefore great number of cases. And this particular theory shares similarities with previous claims that sustained EMF exposure would cause cancer, and you can substitute cancer for almost any disease. So basically, the same conspiracy theory has been applied to 3G technologies and various health effects, 4G technologies and various health effects have now been adapted to SARS-CoV-2, which is the current major health problem in the world. Cancer is another one of them. So they say that exposure to 5G networks result in high numbers of people that would be infected with SARS-CoV-2 and develop COVID-19. And there is some truth to a weakened immune system and increased susceptibility to the virus. A weaker immune system would increase likelihood of infection for a variety of diseases, not just SARS-CoV-2. So I think it's common knowledge that if your immune system is weak, then you are susceptible to a variety of diseases. But for 5G and COVID, was this really the case? And initially, there was an article published in July 2020, which supposedly showed evidence linking 5G, showing how 5G actually affects the body and immune system, and results in production of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And I said we would come back to 5G technology and COVID in skin cells. So the conspiracy theorists have kind of used the alleged effect of 5G on localized heating sensation and have adapted this to actually SARS-CoV-2. So there was a research article published called 5G Technology and Induction of Coronavirus in Skin Cells. It was published in the Journal of Biological Regulators and Homeostatic Agents in July 2020, and the author is Dr. Massimo Firinelli from a Department of Nuclear, Subnuclear and Radiation Physics in Italy, along with several other co-authors. And they made several claims. One, that 5G technology or 5G millimeter waves would be absorbed by skin cells, and the skin cells would then act like antennas, transferring this radiation to other cells, and this combined effect play a role in maintaining, or play the main role in actually producing COVID-19 in biological cells. So basically, their claim is that 5G there is no such thing as a SARS-CoV-2 virus. It's actually the 5G radiation that is causing these virus-like structures to be produced in the body, and that is what the actual COVID-19 infection is. It's not a real virus, but it's due to the 5G millimeter waves. So they claim that the DNA has an inductor-like structure, and these inductors interact with the external 5G waves, and these waves produce holes within the nucleus, and to fill these holes, some extra hexagonal and pentagonal bases are produced. Basically what they're saying, that nucleic acids are being produced, and these nucleic acids produce and join in with each other to form virus-like structures like coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2. And basically it's the 5G technologies that are responsible for causing COVID-19. So was this really conclusive evidence linking COVID-19 to 5G? And I think the authors tried to provide some sort of evidence linking 5G to COVID-19. So if you look on the left-hand side, I'm just going to see if I can actually try and get a laser pointer. You'll see that there are two types of 5G technologies or radio towers, a 5G radio tower and a normal radio tower. Now, the 5G towers produce millimeter waves, and these millimeter waves supposedly can then enter, are small enough to pass into the skin cells and alter the DNA within the skin cells, and this then results in production of the COVID-19 virus. So that's the mechanism by which they claim that 5G technologies actually causes COVID-19. And what they are saying, the reason, and whereas normal radio waves that are not in the 5G millimeter wave spectrum cannot penetrate the skin cells, and therefore cannot cause damage to DNA, and thus the normal radio waves do not produce COVID-19 virus. So COVID-19 is directly related to 5G technologies. But this paper was very quickly retracted, and there's a website called Retraction Watch that keeps track of scientific articles related to a variety of things that have been retracted for various reasons. And sometimes articles are retracted because the claims made by the authors cannot be backed up by traditional good quality research, and this particular paper was retracted because the claims made were actually pseudoscientific. So they sound good in theory, and they kind of make sense. It makes sense that the millimeter wave is small enough to penetrate your cells and then cause changes in your DNA. But in reality, that it has not been proven scientifically, or cannot be proven scientifically. So it sounds good theoretically, but scientifically it's completely inaccurate and can't be proven. So that, but in today's social media world, these kind of articles and information get latched onto very quickly. So even though the article was retracted, the damage had been done, and this particular article has been shared many different times and in many different forms to show linking 5G to COVID-19 in various media platforms. But just to show this particular group of scientists that were involved in this particular article, that published this fake COVID-19 related to 5G. There was an investigation done by a website called vice.com, and they found that this group of scientists are seemingly well credentialed and have been publishing prolifically in obscure scientific journals, accruing hundreds of co-authorships over many years. But most of the articles they publish don't make any sense, and several of the authors' recent articles have since been retracted. So it seems that there are a group of supposed scientists that have been publishing a wide variety of articles relating to 5G technologies and health and COVID, etc. But these articles cannot be backed up by good laboratory science, and they have been since retracted. So just as an example, with regards to COVID-19, there's over 76 research articles that have been retracted in 2020 alone. So there's a lot of misinformation being published with regards to COVID-19 that do not accurately reflect the situation. So moving on to the second conspiracy theory was that the rollout of 5G technologies in many countries have actually contributed and correlates with COVID-19 infections globally. So, but if you look at this particular map of 5G rollout currently across the world, you'll see that even in areas where there are no or very few 5G rollouts, these countries have had significant COVID-19 infections. So there's no correlation between the actual 5G distribution and the COVID-19 distribution. So this is the current global COVID-19 dashboard from the WHO, and this is today's data. So today, as of today, there are 167 million COVID-19 cases globally, more than 3.4 million deaths, and more than 1.5 billion vaccine doses. But if you go, I'm just going to go back, if you look at where the 5G technologies have been rolled out and compare that with the global COVID-19 infections, you'll see that even in South Africa, which has few 5G rollouts, we have had a massive number of infections, and other parts of the world also that do not have significant COVID 5G rollouts, they've also had massive COVID-19 infections. The next conspiracy theory relates to 5G and the causing mutation and spread of the virus. So it's alleged that 5G technologies causes the virus to mutate, but the 5G millimeter waves do not penetrate skin. So and it doesn't even get into your respiratory system. So 5G does not penetrate the skin, while the virus is actually found primarily in the respiratory system. So the millimeter waves do not have sufficient energy to penetrate the skin and cannot get to the lungs or the respiratory system where the virus is actually found. So it's really impossible for 5G to actually cause mutation of the virus. And the mutation of the SARS-CoV-2 virus actually is automatic and occurs randomly as the virus replicates. I'm just trying to get this video to play, but I'm not sure why it's not playing. But anyway, I'll just try and guide you through the video. So as the virus replicates in an infected person's body, the nature of the viral replication is that it's error prone. So because it's error prone, mutations will occur randomly as the virus replicates, and as the virus replicates and spreads from person to person, these mutations accumulate and can be passed on. So this two graphs at the bottom show actually how SARS has evolved, or SARS-CoV-2 has evolved from the original strain that started the global pandemic in Wuhan in China, all the way to today with the variants that we're currently experiencing, the 501, V1, V2, V3 variants, South African variant, the British variant, and then now more recently the Indian variant. And these the emergence of these variants do not correlate with 5G. So there's no scientific evidence to actually correlate 5G and mutation of the SARS-CoV-2 virus and spread of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And last year, towards the end of the year in December, there was a Twitter post which claimed to show a circuit diagram of a chip that of a 5G chip that would be included in the COVID-19 vaccines, and basically governments would have these massive vaccine rollout programs and use the COVID-19 vaccines to spy on citizens. And this supposed chip diagram was evidence of this. And more recently, I think see now there are videos circulating of people having magnets which are sticking to their arms. But again, I think that can be simply solved by showing an X-ray, but nobody shows an X-ray of their arms to show these supposed 5G chips. But in reality, this particular circuit diagram was actually for a Boss guitar pedal, so a musical instrument, and has nothing to do with 5G or any chip diagram or the COVID-19 vaccine. So in summary, many of the claims and conspiracy theories related to 5G and health are based on pseudoscientific and cannot be easily replicated or reliably replicated under laboratory conditions. And there's no correlation between 5G and various skin effects, male infertility, and electromagnetic hypersensitivity. Laboratory versus real-world conditions do not provide strong evidence to support these alleged 5G health effects. So the laboratory conditions generally have higher than normal EMF levels and are under very, very controlled experimental conditions that do not mimic the real world. So the real world conditions will probably not support these alleged health effects. And again, there's a huge difference between animal studies and human studies. And at population level, generally animal studies are done with few laboratory animals for ethical reasons. Human population studies involve thousands, if not more than many more individuals. So you have much better statistical significance and results when you do human population level studies, and those produce contrasting results. So the human studies don't really support strong evidence of 5G and many of these health claims. But diseases like cancer, which are very, very complex and have many multifacets or many different things that can contribute to cancers, require additional research. And in terms of 5G and COVID-19, there's several conspiracy theories that exist. 5G weakens immunity, 5G causes COVID in human cells, 5G rollout resulted in the spread of the virus, and the emergence of new variants and new strains of the virus is due to 5G, and that 5G chips will be included in the vaccines to spy on citizens. All of these conspiracy theories related to COVID-19 are actually false, and there's no scientific basis or evidence to support any link between 5G and COVID-19 and the SARS-CoV-2 virus itself. And that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening.
The link between 5G and COVID-19 is pseudoscience. The 5G millimeter wave does not penetrate skin. Thank you, Esa. Wow, I hope the audience learned as much as I have. Ladies and gents, this type of educational interventions, like these kind of presentations, are made possible by institutes such as the SAIEE and the collaboration with IEEE Africa Council and IEEE Southern Africa, SIGRE Southern Africa, the Africa Utilities Technology Council. From the SAIEE point of view, these interventions are actually led by our telecoms section, which is led by Professor Albert Laisko. And if you can look at the chat box, you will find that there's a link that we've shared there. If you want to be participating in the telecom section, you can just click on there to register yourself to be able to participate in the telecom section. There's a lot of learnings and there's a lot of cross-pollination in terms of technology, humans, and processes. So please feel free to join the section. It's on the link there. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us actually to the Q&A session of this presentation today. Let's see what questions we have been asked for by our to our presenters. Minx Mlu, can you assist me with questions? I'm battling here on my screen.
Yes, sure, Pascal. Our first question is from Albert Lisco. Is there coordination between beams from different base stations? He says, apologies for oversimplification. How many beams need to overlap to exceed the limits?
Yeah, so Albert, yes, you look at total exposure when you do compliance assessments. So it's the exposure from all different sources at a certain point where you do the assessment. It doesn't really matter how many beams you are exposed to. It's still got to do with the energy from the different sources. So it all got to do with how close you are in relation to these sources, these antennas, as well as the amount of power that they transmit from their radios through the antennas into free space.
Thank you, Bethel. Another question we have is, what is more likely to cause harm, if any, base station or cell phone?
Okay, so maybe Isa also wants to say something on that, but I'll just mention your base station. If you look at the cancer IR classification on cancer for cell phones and base stations, it was mentioned very clearly that it's not the environmental exposure that caused their reclassification of the IARC on the classification of cell phones for IARC. So there they mentioned specifically that all the research still ongoing is for the handheld, the mobile cell phone that you have in your hand against your head. The limit of the guideline is very, or the exposure is very close to the limit of the guideline when you use your cell phone rather than from the exposure from the base station. So the concern is more towards the mobile handheld. But again, all of them should be within the guidelines.
Thank
Okay,
you, Wessel.
Yeah, thanks. I couldn't agree more. I think Wessel has captured it perfectly. Most of the research points towards the handheld or the device as being a greater concern.
Okay, but then what precautions can one take to minimize exposure?
I think Wessel can answer that, but I think the Wessel has highlighted that the radiation or the levels would be lower than what is the published limits or from the device itself. I don't think so. The devices exceed those limits.
Yes, Isa, that is correct. The limitations of the devices should guarantee what do you call it, almost inherently compliant exposure. But one thing that people are still concerned about is the long-term effect of usage of that handheld. So there is research ongoing. They have concluded some research which didn't really show anything. But of course, especially with younger kids using the cell phones from earlier and earlier stages, there's still a concern with the developing brain. As you go, as the generation of nowadays, when they get to adulthood, I think the results will prove if there was any manner for concerns on the long-term usage, especially from younger kids. One thing, of course, in favor of that is that people don't really speak on cell phones anymore. So the cell phone isn't really against your head anymore. It's all social media and on with your fingers that you have. And of course, there's less stringent guidelines for localized exposure of limbs and all that. So I think it should be fine.
If I can just add to that, I think Wessel has captured it very, very nicely. But I would like to use an example to to show why long-term studies are really, really important. And if everybody is familiar with diabetes as a disease, you probably have family members that are exposed to or have diabetes, and diabetes occurs as a result of your, especially type 2 diabetes. Your body no longer produces enough insulin to deal with the amount of sugar that you are actually consuming. So on a daily basis, you may not notice. So when you are young, you don't realize how much sugar you're actually consuming, and you feel you're fine. And then 20, 30 years later, you go to the doctor and you get diagnosed with diabetes. And it's really that long-term accumulation or bad diet that contributes to that. So in the same way, or in a similar way, there is concern that long-term exposure or continued exposure may result in certain health effects, particularly cancer, and that's why research is important for long-term to get a better understanding of how these technologies and how this EMF radiation may actually contribute to long-term health effects. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Prof. Laisko, the telecom section chair. He's asking, what is the typical distance to the base station to the below few percent of the safe level, and does such distance depend on the frequency band used and how? Sounds like a loaded question. Any takers?
I will take that, Pascal. Yes, it all depends on frequency. So as you increase frequency, your wavelength actually decreases. So the amount of energy used by the wavelength to travel that same distance is much more. So when you get to a certain position, the higher frequencies exposure value should be lower than what the low frequency exposure value is. So to say what a safe distance is, it all depends on the setup of the base station. Let's say there's a base station with all the technologies in all the frequency bands available, in something like 30 meters away, but directly in line of sight and at the same height than the antenna. The exposure could be then above the guideline, let's say at about 30 meters. So that's why instances like the city of Cape Town has got the RF or base station policy, where they show a certain distance away from the base station. If you do it correctly, you will show this distance away from the antennas and at the level of the antennas, because of course when you have directional antennas like these and you walk underneath them or so on, there's very little energy being transmitted in those directions because of the directivity. So I don't want to give a number because it's all got to do with the amount of energy being transmitted from that base station. If you think about the Centec tower, they have kilowatts of power being pumped out at very low frequencies. So there, of course, the exposure and the exclusion zones around those antennas is very big. You will be far away from it and still can be overexposed. That's why those antennas are also on hilltops and so on, far away from people, also to get good coverage and all that. But it all got to do with the frequency and the amount of power being transmitted.
Thank you, Wessel. We've got another question for you. A nice stab from Mr. Howard Reeder. He says, let me first commend Wessel on an extremely clear presentation, because everybody was complaining about your audio. But the question is, can one argue that with focused beams and 5G technology, when a connection is made, produce lower energy densities than existing cellular technology, which has continuous non-agile radiation patterns?
You, Minx, can you just repeat that one, please? I know Howard Reeder, he was a professor at Stellenbosch University, and I'm sure this is a curveball question, but if you can just repeat that one, please.
Absolutely. Can one argue that with focused beams in 5G technology, when a connection is made, produce lower energy densities than existing cellular technology, which has continuous non-agile radiation patterns?
Yeah, I think when you make the connection, you have a broadcast channel. Those broadcast channels are already at lower intensity than your traffic beams. So I would say no to his question, because the connectivity is made through the broadcast channels, which is almost like you can say it's 4G technology on that 5G system. And the traffic beams with the very good directivity and the beam focusing is only for traffic. So I hope I've answered this question.
Thank you, Wessel. A question to both of you from Olawosian Oyerinda. Are there 5G postdoctoral research opportunities available?
So from my side, my area of research is not directly on 5G technology and how I work on infectious diseases, including SARS-CoV-2 and various other infectious diseases. So if he's interested in that kind of research, he's welcome to contact me. But I don't really work on 5G. But there may be opportunities at CSR from, and I think maybe Albert can guide on that one if they are.
Thank you. I can just maybe reiterate in the chat box to Mr. Oyerinda is the application to join the telecom section, the SAIEE telecom section. So please, I encourage you to join the chapter and you might just find answers on all your questions. Our next question is from Mr. Tina Stander. He's asking, do current SIR limits assume uniform exposure over the body? If so, is this assumption still valid with narrow beams formed close to femtocells and handsets, where exposure may be non-uniform over the body?
Yes, so means there are different guidelines. As I've mentioned earlier, there's whole body exposure and there's localized exposure. And when it comes to handhelds and the body and your hand very close to the exposing or the source of exposure, then they use something called SAR, which is specific absorption rate, to calculate then the exposure within your body, as well as the guidelines or the exposure in terms of the guidelines on that one.
Thank you very much. Another question from Mr. Sicelo Nkosi. I've seen a scary video on social media where a cell phone rings next to a steel wool and it caught fire due to high radiation. Is this fake or real?
Yeah, I mean, I can't comment. I haven't seen the video, but there's a lot of fake videos on cell phones. The most common one is that one where the popcorn is popping alongside the cell phone, and I think they've de-jinxed that one by showing the proper video where they also lifted the little tablecloth and there was a hot plate underneath. So there's a lot of fake videos out there.
Absolutely, thank you. Another question we have, would a lead apron be suitable protective gear against radiation?
So now you're going into the ionizing radiation. So if you think about the people working in X-ray departments in hospitals, that's called ionizing radiation. It's got enough energy to break chemical bonds and so on. And the people operating the X-ray machines, sometimes when you assist the patient, you get given a lead apron, and then also they stand behind the lead-enforced wall to be not as exposed as the people, the patients. So there is protection for ionizing radiation, but this is what we're talking about tonight is non-ionizing radiation, of course.
Thank you, Wessel. Here's a comment from Mr. Howard Reeder. Thanks for answering, Wessel. And then a question to Dr. Suleiman from Mr. Howard Reeder. Again, very clear presentation, he says. His question is, what are your views on non-thermal effects, for example, concerns about blood-brain barriers?
Thanks for the question. I think that question may be a little bit outside of my area of expertise, considering that I work primarily on infectious disease and I'm not a medical doctor. But so just I don't think there would be a significant effect. But yeah, I don't think so I can fully answer that question. Apologies.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. We've got a question here from Mr. Simon Buretti. He says, besides retracting articles, were there some sanctions imposed upon publishers who publish unsubstantiated articles correlating 5G and SARS-CoV-2?
Unfortunately not. There haven't really been any sanctions against these authors. So I think that's one of the major problems with the unsubstantiated work that is then subsequently retracted, is that many of these retractions then go unpunished. I know, but it also varies from country to country, but there's no sort of standard international system to make sure that authors who deliberately publish fake or false scientific research actually get punished. But I know there was an incident a few years back with regards to stem cells and cloning in Japan, where some authors had published some manipulated data and data that was not completely or 100% scientifically accurate and could not accurately be replicated in other labs across the world, and those individuals actually lost their jobs and were barred from doing science for a certain number of years. But that's probably one of the rare exceptions that generally this kind of thing is actually going unpunished. And the problem is that there's no real authority or organization that can actually implement sanctions or take such authors to task, unfortunately.
Thank you, Dr. Suleiman. Our last question tonight is from Richard Edmund. He's asking, he's stating there are claims that the past trends in development of network technologies have been linked to various deadly diseases, like 3G was linked to SRS outbreak and 4G linked to swine flu. My apologies. He's asking, has this been proved right?
No, none of those claims have been proven right from as far as I know. So and just to elaborate on that point is that I think some of these conspiracy theories go as far back as mobile technologies, the development of mobile technologies, and as the technology improves and you go from 2G to 3G to 5G and so forth, the claims and the conspiracy theories sort of change form. So there was 5G conspiracy theories or conspiracy theories related to mobile technologies, 3G and 4G related to cancer, and now that has continued to 5G and has also been adapted to COVID. So and coming back to the initial SARS and MERS outbreaks, those were linked to 3G, and now we have COVID-19 supposedly linked to 5G. So it's just the same conspiracy theory is being adapted for different technologies, but there's no evidence to support any of those claims.
Thank you, Dr. Suleiman. That was our last question. Over to you, Pascal.
Thank you so much, Minx. Apologies again that I'm struggling on my side here. The technology is trying to embarrass us. That wraps up our webinar, webisode for tonight. Thank you so much, and a virtual round of applause for the speakers for their riveting presentation. Please don't forget to, if you want to join the telecom section, the link is on the right-hand side of your screen under the chat. You can just click there and then you can join. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having joined us for this evening. Please be on the lookout for an email from the SAIEE with the attendance certificate and your CPD points. The recording will be uploaded onto the SAIE's YouTube channel, the SAIE TV. The presentation will also be made accessible via www.saiee.org.za, or you can email us at reception@saiee.org.za to get our attention. Let's meet again same time next week, where we'll be addressing yet another riveting and engaging topic titled 5G SMMEs and entrepreneurship opportunities. I thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.